We need to make it easier for the monarch to just simply strip the titles of people that they don't think are representing them in an appropriate manner.
A quiet decision has just been made behind the thick walls of the palace, yet its impact is powerful enough to reshape the entire future of the dynasty. This decision immediately thrusts Lady Louise Windsor, who has long stood on the fringes of the spotlight, straight into the epicenter of a fierce, silent conflict within the palace walls. As it turns out, her lack of a title over the past 15 years was not merely a simple lifestyle chosen by her parents, but a fatal blind spot that left Prince William isolated amidst mounting pressures. Now a battle line has been clearly drawn. On one side are the conservative courtiers determined to hold fast to old precedents, and on the other is King Charles III with a history-reversing move. He has decided to grant Louise a new title, along with a brilliant responsibility, turning her into a sturdy shield to protect William's future throne. How intense has this silent confrontation between the two factions behind closed doors been? What happens when personal choices must yield to the survival of the royal family? And how will Lady Louise walk her path when the shadow of responsibility suddenly falls upon her shoulders? The most seismic upheavals within the House of Windsor have never begun with noise. They always originate from an extremely small, quiet shift, buried deep beneath solemn internal memos, accessible only to a select few with the highest authority. But this time, that quiet rhythm suddenly carries an entirely different weight. When King Charles III decided to revisit a choice concerning Lady Louise Windsor's status, one that seemed to have been laid to rest 15 years ago, an invisible shift occurred. Those who first noticed this rift understood precisely that once a long-standing precedent is reversed, the future of the dynasty will be reshaped. Initially, this move did not resemble an event that could cause a storm. Palace internal notes have always been filled with dry explanations to maintain the status quo. However, this time, the atmosphere surrounding the dialogues began to exhibit an unmistakable pressure. Those close to the inner circles of Windsor power began to feel the tension silently spreading through controlled whispers. Confidential reports indicate that a detailed review has been triggered by the king. The focus is not on the present, but rather points back to the past, aiming directly at a choice that shaped the identity and public role of a branch of the royal family. Lady Louise Windsor, long considered the quietest and most private member of the younger generation, has suddenly become the subject of intense discussion. Officials have begun speaking of her in terms of unresolved structural equations. Louise's absence from the list of official titled members since childhood had always been explained as the personal wish of her parents, Prince Edward and the Duchess of Edinburgh. But now, those running the palace machinery are beginning to acknowledge another truth. That story was never the whole truth. Structurally and historically, regarding sovereign power, Louise's true position never completely vanished. It merely lay frozen, suspended between personal freedom and the continuity of tradition. And it is precisely this suspended space that King Charles III is now dissecting with a determination that goes far beyond mere curiosity. Behind closed doors, serious consultations began to emerge. Ancient documents defining royal status were revisited to weigh the implications of restoring what had been set aside. This dialogue was not driven by family sentiment, but by succession and an undeniable reality. The framework of the monarchy never easily forgets what has been written into its foundation, leaving a branch of the royal family with an ambiguous status as the dynasty enters a strategic transition phase began to be viewed as a major risk that needed to be addressed to protect the future of Prince William. However, even within these discrete debates, the first fractures between factions have begun to show. Senior officials received orders to handle Louise's matter with exceptional caution. The language became astonishingly guarded, as if they well understood that a single misstep in acknowledgement could cause an entire system of precedents to collapse. A quiet but palpable unease began to spread. People began to realize that this battle was not merely about a young woman's title. It was about a broader reality. If a long-term decision could be overturned, what other arrangements of the past would be the next dominoes to fall? To understand why King Charles III's decision carries such immense weight, one must turn back the pages of history. A choice that seemed small and modest at the time has brought about profound consequences as time passed. In the early 2000s, as Prince Edward and Sophie prepared to welcome their children, they made a decision that astonished the British public. They declined to use official royal titles for their children, including Lady Louise Windsor. In the press, this move was highly praised as a modern gesture. Louise's parents wanted their children to grow up without bearing the weight of royal expectations, experiencing a normal life, and freely choosing their own paths based on personal merit. That explanation entirely won public trust due to its relatable and human nature. But behind that flawless veneer, the core rigid framework of the dynasty continued to operate under ironclad rules, regardless of personal wishes. According to firm precedents established during the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, the right to hold royal status is not something that can be casually put on or taken off based on preference. It is deeply embedded in the bloodline, defined by lineage, and protected by supreme decrees that outlast any individual life. Frankly speaking, Edward and Sophie's decision 15 years ago only held value as a lifestyle statement to the media. It could by no means erase Louise's position. Her status was merely placed in a state of suspension, waiting quietly in the shadows, never legally relinquished. It was from this suspended space that an imbalance began to emerge. Those with a deep understanding of the unwritten rules began to question whether a branch of the family, stepping back, had inadvertently created a dangerous loophole. Louise, despite being raised out of the spotlight, still carries direct lineage and immense potential. Over time, that potential did not fade. It lingered in the private conversations of advisors whose duty is to protect the stability of the throne. The question of Louise's absence gradually evolved into a strategic concern. Could a gesture made in an old era still hold its value in a new, unpredictably volatile age? Had rejecting this title inadvertently weakened the succession apparatus, limiting a role that the dynasty would one day desperately need? The complexity of the issue lies in the sharp contrast it creates. On one hand, the dynasty is trying to streamline its public image. On the other hand, they are always bound by strict traditional rules, the only thing that distinguishes them from the outside world. Lady Louise's position sits right at the conflicting crossroads of these two currents of thought. She represents both an intention to adapt and proof that there are foundational values that cannot be altered arbitrarily. As whispers spread, the narrative began to shift noticeably. What was once praised as a thoughtful decision now appeared through a complex lens, even viewed as a long-term miscalculation. In this intensifying debate, Louise was no longer a passive figure. She became the focal point of a comprehensive reassessment of succession and the future of the entire royal order. Behind the closed doors of the palace, the atmosphere no longer maintained its usual serenity. What was once considered a closed chapter in family history is now being dug up, bringing a wave of unease that ripples through the officials responsible for guarding the monarchy's balance of power. The debate over Lady Louise Windsor's title and status quickly fractured the institution into two distinct battle lines, an underground war without gunfire, yet fraught with media and ceremonial warnings. On one side of the battle line are the conservative traditionalists. This is a gathering of old courtiers and long-standing advisors with traditional mindsets who believe that precedents and past decisions are sacred things that must not be touched. To them, the choice made 15 years ago by Prince Edward and Sophie was not merely a personal decision, but a strategic declaration of modern restraint for an entire era. The conservatives argue that reversing a decision deeply embedded in public perception would send an extremely dangerous signal of instability. It would make the public view the royal family as an institution that is confused, self-contradictory, and unable to stand firmly behind its past choices. They use closely aligned media channels to leak cautionary articles, implying that reviving Louise's title is a redundant move that risks disrupting the scaled-back monarchy strategy that the late Queen painstakingly built. But on the other side of the battle line, another line of reasoning is gaining dominance with unstoppable force: the reformists who support structural calibration. This school of thought views the past decision not as a lesson in humility, but as a flawed move, a mistake that must be corrected immediately before it is too late. They question why a gesture meant to temporarily appease public opinion should be allowed to create a long-term structural loophole in the succession personnel system. The reformists argue that ambiguity and vagueness are the greatest enemies of a system built on clearly defined roles and inherited responsibilities. To them, Louise's undefined status is no longer just the private affair of the Edinburgh family, but has become a dangerous blind spot that must be sealed before the foundation of the dynasty is more deeply shaken by a shortage of working royals. This polarization did not explode into loud arguments or face-to-face confrontations. In the light of day, the royal family has never operated in such a crude manner. Instead, the battle plays out through subtly planted op-eds in major newspapers, through cold tones in internal briefings, and through quiet isolation at public events. Perceptive observers can spot this shift through seating arrangements and how the appearance frequency of members is deliberately adjusted on official media channels. Matters became even more complex and tense when questions of fairness began to be discreetly discussed. Advisors started placing Lady Louise's case on the scale to compare it with other members of the next generation, particularly Princess Charlotte. Charlotte's role has always been defined with absolute clarity. From the moment she was born, a position leaving no room for ambiguity or doubt. People began to ask, why should one branch of the family be entitled to move with certainty and clear identity, while another branch, also carrying direct lineage and equivalent potential, must endure ambiguity, dragging on year after year? This was not a question born of personal jealousy, but a serious test of the system's consistency. Because in the world of sovereign power, public perception of consistency and fairness carries equal weight to the strictest rules. Any discrepancy, no matter how small, if allowed to linger, could turn into a dangerous weapon for those wishing to attack the legitimacy of the throne. Amidst that undercurrent, Lady Louise's public presence began to undergo a quiet but irreversible evolution. She was no longer confined to the fringes of family events. People began to see her appear more frequently, taking on higher-profile roles in symbolic royal events. This change immediately caught the attention of media observers. Because real-life appearances always possess the power to change perception, and perception is what shapes palace reality. The more she stepped into the light, the more poignant and compelling the question hanging over each of Louise's appearances became: where does she truly stand in this power order? The ambiguity once viewed as her protective shield 15 years ago is now turning into a burden, a situation where keeping silent or taking no action carries the weight of a declaration of war. The underground war has pushed the internal pressure within the fortified walls to its peak, making this a decision that can no longer be delayed. The division between the factions in the palace did not explode into loud arguments, but it crept into every corner of the administrative machinery with an ever-increasing pressure. As the dynasty enters a volatile and uncertain transition phase at the highest levels, the strategic landscape surrounding the throne has begun to shift ruthlessly. The royal family is shrinking. The number of members undertaking public duties has decreased significantly, and the pressure on the next generation has become greater than ever. In that context, keeping a resource like Lady Louise Windsor on the fringes of ambiguity is no longer an expression of modern humility, but is gradually turning into a fatal weakness. Strategic minds at the palace began to view the future of the dynasty through a realistic and cold lens. The future of the throne cannot rely solely on a single individual, but depends on a network of roles operating smoothly and consistently. Prince William, the Prince of Wales, is bearing increasingly heavy responsibilities during a period fraught with skepticism from the outside world. To prepare for that future building, a solid, transparent, and action-ready support framework is a paramount task. Louise's undefined presence, therefore, is seen as a dangerous structural loophole that must be closed before it expands into a genuine personnel crisis. Pressure from the reformist faction began to mount deliberately. They argued that preparing the next generation is not a matter of preference or personal choice, but a survival imperative for the institution. The royal family cannot allow any member of the direct line to stand aside when the system needs stability more than ever. The inherent silence and caution of the palace corridors are now replaced by a quiet sense of urgency. Discussions measuring the long-term consequences of inaction showed that if Louise's status continues to be left hanging, the dynasty will deprive itself of an element capable of reinforcing the continuity of the institution in the coming decades. The strategic link between Louise's status and the future of Prince William became increasingly clear. Advisors realized that a strong system is one where every position is clearly defined and every potential contribution is recognized before it becomes an urgent necessity. Leaving a branch of the royal family in an ambiguous state only creates public doubt and speculation, a solution that can erode the perception of the dynasty's stability. The pressure of contemporary reality has pushed the personnel equation to its peak, turning the restoration of Louise's status into a mandatory move to anticipate the long-term challenges ahead. When structural pressure accumulated to the point where it could no longer be delayed, the major upheaval finally occurred quietly, but with an irreversible impact. King Charles III officially signaled the reversal of the Wessex branch's 15-year-old decision, reopening the path for Lady Louise Windsor to re-establish her status within the royal order. There was no loud announcement or flamboyant declaration to the media to mark this moment. Instead, the change appeared in the way the most important turning points of the palace usually do, through subtle confirmations, textual adjustments in internal documents, and a quiet acknowledgement that something once considered fixed has now begun to shift. This decision carries supreme weight regarding the power of the crown. As Sovereign King Charles III holds the ultimate prerogative to review, interpret, and reshape the application of titles within the family. This is a power rarely exercised in a way that challenges past choices, precisely because doing so always carries the risk of shaking the delicate balance between continuity and change. However, this calibration comes after careful consideration of both historical precedent and the strategic needs of the institution. The monarchy, though, built on a foundation of permanence, can only survive if it knows how to adapt when the reality of the times demands it. The restoration of Louise's prerogatives carries a deeply profound symbolic message. It is a tacit acknowledgement that her parents' protective decision years ago, though stemming from love and thoughtfulness in an old context, is no longer suited to the dynasty's current direction. With this move, the king has sent a razor-sharp signal regarding principle. The needs and survival of the institution must permanently be placed above the personal choices or preferences of family members. It is a subtle reminder that the path of every individual bearing Windsor blood must ultimately be shaped by the demands of the crown. The reaction within the palace walls, as expected, was far from uniform. Surprise mingled with approval, yet remained shrouded in an undercurrent of apprehension. Some core figures viewed the move as an inevitable correction, a necessary synchronization between legal status and actual capability. Conversely, those in the conservative faction saw it as an unsettling disruption, a precedent that could open the door to further questions about the king's past decisions and future intentions. However, despite differing interpretations, a reality has been established, the old order has been broken, and a new, leaner, more focused structure is being erected to prepare for the next generation. With the decisive reversal from the throne, a new reality officially opens before Lady Louise Windsor. She is no longer quietly positioned in the blurry margins of court life. Louise steps straight into a new space, one enveloped by grand expectations, high public visibility, and the spiritual weight of institutional responsibility. The transition from a life designed to seek normalcy to a role clearly defined by duty is not an easy path, but a comprehensive test of character and adaptation. This shift immediately changes the way the younger generation of royals is perceived. Previous implicit comparisons regarding ambiguity have now given way to focused curiosity from the public and observers about how Louise's role will evolve. The monarchy has proven a vital trait that has helped it survive through centuries: the capacity to self-correct and self-calibrate to maintain alignment with the times without compromising its core identity. Bringing Louise back into the light is not merely an act of personal recognition, but part of a long-term strategy to ensure that the support frameworks for Prince William will operate in the most flawless and rock-solid manner in the future. The story closes not with a compromise or a peace communique, but with a profound echo and a major question hanging over the institution. Titles and legal status can be defined by royal prerogatives, but it is actions and commitment that mold the true legacy of a royal. Now, with the suspended space erased, Lady Louise Windsor stands at the greatest crossroads of her life. The public has seen the dynasty's preparation, but the world will have to wait to see how she will navigate and assert her influence within the newly forged framework of power. Within the House of Windsor, the quietest decisions are always the ones that echo through generations. And this new chapter has only just begun to be written. Now, with the suspended space erased, Lady Louise Windsor stands at the greatest crossroads of her life. Do you think the proud return of the forgotten child will be the master key that helps Prince William firmly steer the dynasty through the storms of the era? Or will this precedent-reversing decision by King Charles III inadvertently ignite a new wave of unease within the palace walls? Leave your thoughts right below. Do you support this razor-sharp yet timely strategic move by the king? Or do you feel regret for the lost piece of the Edinburgh family? Will Louise become a resilient rose bearing heavy responsibilities? Or will the weight of the invisible crown once again alter her destiny? Don't forget to leave a comment to share your perspective on the future of the House of Windsor. Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.